Hi, my name is Natalie Yáñez Gallegos, and I'm going to talk about some topics about the region and history of English. The first topic is the fusion of two peoples. What does that mean? The fusion, obviously, to the French people, the Normans, and the English people that nowadays is known by British people. So, in the years following the Norman conquest, the sting of defeat and the hardships incident to so great and political and social disturbance were readily forgotten. Okay, the first is the main character of this history is William the Conqueror, who was an important character who has an important role in this history of the English. Okay, the fusion of Normans and English was very rapid, and it was because all the people accept the orders, and because there was a national interest and the intercourse of everyday life would normally bring about. This means that the people accept the union of the French and English people. Okay, the English meaning all people of England and French meaning the inhabitants of French. As we know, nowadays there are words that have an origin to the French, maybe like the word meat, but also the people said beef. Beef is a word of French, a French word. So nowadays there are several words taken of the French. As we as we have already talked about the unions of the Normans in English. One example is when Robert the Olive married with Edgett, the daughter of a great English Londoner. This version seems to have gone forward rapidly in the reign of Henry I, and by the end of the 12th, one English jurist wrote that the English and Norman have been dealing together, marrying and giving in marriage. The two nations have become so mixed that it is scarcely possible today, speaking of free men, to tell who is English, who of Norman race. These events of the next century, the loss of Normandy, the growing antagonism toward France were necessary to complete the union. The union, the social union, the political union, was an important and psychological as well as physical to all the inhabitants of England. That means that the unions, maybe for marriage or maybe for political situations, have an impact as well as psychological and physical. The other topic is the diffusion of French and English. One difficult question of why English and French were used in England after the Norman conquest is not easily to answer. As we know, there were unions like political, social, And that that were an important point in this history. From time to time, writers of the period tell us that such as one spoke both French and English, or that he was ignorant of one or the other language. What does that mean? Maybe maybe the descendants of people who have a union with a French and or English, maybe when a man have a union with a English woman, their descendants have an ability to spoke both. From all this accumulated testimony, the situation can be easily enough stated in general terms as indeed has already been done. As we know, French was the language of the court and obviously the government upper classes, the royal people, as the king, as the queen, whatever. And also the English, the speech of the mass of the people, the lower class. It is a possibility that the middle class speak both because there are in the between the upper and the lower. So the next topic is the knowledge of English among the upper class. As we said, the upper class have a marked social distinction with the French. The French was the principal language that the upper class spoke. On the other hand, the English was the language of the greater part of the population, obviously the lower class. That English survived for a considerable time in some monasteries it is evident from the fact that a Peterborough the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was continued until 1154. Among churchmen, the ability to speak English was apparently fairly common. As we know, before the Norman conquest, the Romans also conquered this part of the world that it is nowadays England, and Romans introduced the Latin inside to the church, into the church and monasteries spoke Latin. So it is the language of the religion in this time. Nowadays is the religion have a lot of idioms. Okay, as we know, the Romans have a very important impact into the religion in, with the Christianism. So obviously, in this part of the time, the people who spoke English want to know about the religion. So the English was in that time, the most important. But the knowledge of the English was not uncommon at the end of the 12th century among those who habitually used French. What does that mean? Okay, the upper class, as we know, the main language was the French. So it was not uncommon that people that were in the upper class known about the English. So it is obviously. And also the churchmen and men of education, it was even to be expected. That among those whose activities brought them into the contact with both upper and lower classes, the ability to speak both languages was quite general. As we know, the descendants of one French and English people have an ability to speak both language because it is obviously because it is about the heritage that the ancestors gave us. And also, since English was the language of the greater part of the population in England, many of the upper class found it necessary to acquire some familiarity of it. That means of the greatest in part the English in the lower class. So, and the lower class or the part of the population have an impact be- because obviously in the lower class have a lot of people obviously than the upper class, so the upper class found a necessity to speak or understand something about English because obviously they want to communicate to their other classes like the lower classes. It is something obviously. And the last topic is the knowledge of French among the middle class. If by the end of the 12th century a knowledge of English was not unusual among members of the higher class, the upper class, it seems equally clear that a knowledge of French was often found somewhat further down in the social scale. This means that the upper class, the social scale, where it is high, only speak French. Not only speak French, but it is the main language, the French. In many towns, especially and important trading centers, men with Norman names were the most prominent burgesses and probably constituted a majority of the merchant class. This means that all the people who have who are descendants for Norman people, French people, have probably have a prominent title. Recent insights from sociolinguistics into the structures of Pidgin and Creole language have led some linguists to ask whether Middle English was a Creole. The Middle English was a Creole because the Creole is a language that it is learned as a first language. That means the after that the people began to speak English as a first language was a Creole because now in this country that it is England, the now the main language is English. It is learned by the first language. It is a Creole, and the difference with Pidgin is that the Pidgin is a simplified language used only for communication between speakers of different language like Spanish, Portuguese, French, or English. Nowadays, also, English is a pidgin because it is the global language because it is used in every part of the world. So, thus, in the period of preceding the lost Normandy in 1204, there were some who spoke only French and many more who spoke only English. If you have the ability to learn any I need a language only to hear and have an ability to learn different language and be bilingual or multilingual. So it is a great ability. So this is all, and thank you.